He didn't notice when it happened. That's the thing about slow destruction. It never announces itself. It doesn't knock on your door with a warning sign. It moves quietly, disguised as normal life, wrapped in laughter, comfort, and the familiar faces of people you trust. Paulo had a steady job. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't chasing get-rich schemes or throwing money away on obvious traps. By every measure, he was just living, going out when the group called, eating well because the table was always full, sleeping in when the week had been hard, scrolling late into the night because everyone else was doing the same. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looked like a mistake from the outside. But money has a way of telling the truth that people won't. And month after month, the truth was the same. Not enough left, not enough saved. Not enough to show for the hours worked and the years passed. The promotion he expected never came. The business idea he'd been meaning to start stayed exactly where he left it, in the back of his mind, waiting for a moment that somehow never arrived. And the people around him, they were in the same place, same conversations, same complaints, same plans that never moved. That's the invisible cycle. It doesn't feel like failure because it's shared. When everyone around you operates the same way, the pattern becomes invisible. It just looks like life. But Scripture has always been clear about something the modern world prefers to ignore. The people closest to you are shaping you in ways you cannot fully see. Their habits become your habits. Their priorities quietly become your priorities. Their ceiling, without you ever choosing it, starts to feel like your ceiling too. God didn't warn about bad company to be harsh. He warned because he understands human nature better than we understand ourselves. We are not islands. We absorb. We adapt. We reflect the environment we spend the most time in. And when that environment is built on comfort, excess, idle words, and the slow religion of procrastination, the cost is not just spiritual. It shows up in your finances, in your focus, in the opportunities that passed you by while you were busy being comfortable. This is not a message about judging the people in your life. It's about something deeper, about developing the kind of discernment that lets you see clearly what is building you and what is quietly, consistently draining you. Because the damage rarely comes all at once. It comes the way rust comes to iron, slowly, invisibly, until the structure can no longer hold. And the question worth sitting with today is not whether you have bad company. The question is whether you have been paying close enough attention to notice. There is a word that feels completely harmless until you trace where it leads. The word is deserving. You worked hard this week, so you deserve to spend a little more. You've been stressed, so you deserve to check out for the weekend. You've been responsible for so long, so you deserve to stop thinking about money for a while. And none of those sentences sound dangerous. That's exactly the problem. The shift happens so gradually that you never catch the moment it turns. What begins as a reasonable reward becomes a rhythm. The rhythm becomes an expectation. The expectation becomes a non-negotiable part of how you live. And before long, your financial decisions are no longer being made by the version of you that has goals and vision. They're being made by the version of you that needs to feel good right now. That version doesn't build anything. It only consumes. But here's what makes this particularly difficult to see in yourself. You are rarely making these decisions alone. The pull toward comfort is almost always amplified by the people around you. The group chat that plans the outing before you've even checked your budget. The friend who always has a reason to celebrate. The social circle where spending is how you show you belong, where saying no makes you the difficult one, where restraint is quietly treated like a personality flaw. You don't just choose comfort. You are invited into it, repeatedly, by people who are choosing it too. Proverbs 21:17 doesn't soften this truth. It says plainly that whoever loves pleasure will become poor. not might, not risks it, will. Because pleasure, when it becomes the organizing principle of your life, crowds out everything that requires patience, sacrifice, and long-term thinking. And long-term thinking is the only kind that builds anything worth having. This is not about never enjoying your life. God created rest, celebration, and beauty. None of that is the enemy. What Scripture warns against is allowing the appetite for comfort to sit in the driver's seat of your decisions. When the question you ask most often is not where am I going, but what do I feel like doing today, you have handed over the steering wheel. And if the people around you are asking the same question, nobody in that car is watching the road. The company you keep sets the standard for what feels normal. If your circle normalizes spending without saving, celebrating without building, enjoying without planning, that becomes your baseline. Not because you are weak, but because human beings are designed to calibrate to their environment. God wired us for community, and community shapes us whether we are conscious of it or not. The most expensive thing in your life may not be what you buy. It may be who you allow to define what normal looks like for you. There was a season in her life when Mariana was everyone's favorite person to have at the table. She never said no to a second plate. She never left a gathering early. She matched the energy of every room she walked into. Louder when the group was loud, slower when the night called for it, always willing to stay just a little longer, eat just a little more, drink just a little deeper into the evening. People loved being around her, and she loved being loved. What nobody talked about was what happened the morning after, the heaviness, the mental fog that made simple decisions feel like climbing stairs with weight on her back, the sluggishness that turned her most productive hours into wasted ones. She wasn't lazy by nature, but she had built a lifestyle around a group that celebrated excess, and excess has a biological cost that no amount of good intentions can cancel out. Science has confirmed what Solomon wrote thousands of years ago: the body under consistent overindulgence, too much food, too much alcohol, too many late nights, too little discipline at the table, produces chronic inflammation, disrupted sleep, and what researchers now call cognitive fog. The mind slows. Reaction time drops. Creativity dulls. The capacity to focus on complex problems, to think strategically, to sustain effort over time, all of it quietly erodes. And in the real world, that erosion has a dollar amount attached to it. Slower thinking means missed opportunities. Poor focus means lower output. Lower output means stagnant income. The connection is not abstract. It shows up in your results. Proverbs 23 addresses this with a directness that might feel uncomfortable. Do not join those who drink too much wine or gorge themselves on meat, because drunkards and gluttons become poor, and drowsiness clothes them in rags. The word drowsiness there is not accidental. It is the specific consequence named, not just moral compromise, but a physical and mental state that makes productivity impossible. A body without self-control produces a mind without focus. And a mind without focus cannot build, cannot plan, cannot execute anything that requires sustained discipline. The deeper issue is what the group makes acceptable. When the people around you normalize overindulgence, when the culture of your circle is built around eating without limits, drinking without boundaries, staying without restraint, your own tolerance for excess quietly rises. What would have felt like too much 2 years ago now feels like Tuesday. The group calibrates your sense of normal downward, one gathering at a time, and you absorb it so gradually that you stop noticing the cost. Self-mastery over the body is not a minor spiritual detail. In Scripture, it is consistently connected to wisdom, productivity, and the capacity to steward what God entrusts to you. You cannot build with a tool that has been systematically dulled. And the body is the first tool you were given. I know that phrase from the inside. Just a little more rest. Just one more episode. Just until the weekend. Then I'll start. Just one more day to feel ready. I lived inside that sentence for longer than I want to admit. And the most dangerous part was never the procrastination itself. It was how invisible it felt, because everyone around me was doing the same thing. When your entire circle operates on delay, you lose your internal alarm. There is no friction. Nobody is moving faster than you, so your stillness registers as normal. Nobody is building while you're waiting, so the waiting feels reasonable. The group becomes a mirror that reflects your inaction back to you as rest, as balance, as wisdom, when what it actually is drift. Comfortable, socially validated, completely invisible drift. I remember the specific feeling of those seasons. Not guilt, exactly. More like a low hum of unease that I had learned to ignore, because ignoring it was easier than confronting what it meant. The project sat untouched, the plan stayed in my head, the income stayed flat, and the weeks turned into months with nothing to show for them except a long record of almost started. Proverbs 6 does not dress this up. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief. The word thief matters. A thief does not make an appointment. Poverty built on procrastination arrives the same way, quietly, while you were comfortable, while the moment felt manageable, while you told yourself there was still time. What I eventually understood is that changing my habits required changing my environment first. Not because I had no willpower, but because willpower was never designed to work alone against a current pulling in the opposite direction. When I got close to people who treated time as sacred, who moved with intention, who felt genuine discomfort around wasted days, something in me shifted. Their standard became pressure, and that pressure, the healthy kind, was what finally made stillness feel wrong instead of safe. The urgency you have been missing may not come from within. Sometimes it has to come from who you choose to stand next to. Pay attention the next time you sit down with your closest circle, not to what people say they value, but to where the conversation actually goes when nobody is being careful. Does it move toward ideas, toward problems being solved, toward someone sharing what they are learning or building? Or does it slide, almost automatically, toward who did what, who got what they didn't deserve, what's wrong with the company, what's wrong with the economy, what's wrong with everyone who isn't in the room right now? Most people have never stopped to measure the ratio. But that ratio is costing you in ways that never show up on a bank statement. Gossip and chronic complaint do something specific to the mind. They train it to scan for problems rather than possibilities. They wire you for suspicion rather than collaboration. And over time, they make you someone that trustworthy, opportunity-carrying people quietly learn to avoid. You may never get a rejection. No one will tell you directly. But the partnership that never got proposed, the introduction that never happened, the door that was never opened in your direction, those silences have a cause. Reputation moves faster than you do, and it travels through exactly the kind of conversations you think are private. Proverbs 16:28 says that a perverse person stirs up conflict, and a gossip separates close friends. 1 Corinthians 15:33 is even more direct. Bad company corrupts good character, not influences, not risks corrupting, corrupts. The people who speak poorly of others in front of you will speak poorly of you in front of others. That is not cynicism, it is pattern recognition, and Scripture named it long before modern psychology did. There is also something that happens to your own spirit in environments built on complaint. You begin to believe that your circumstances are someone else's fault, that the system is rigged, that effort doesn't pay, that the people who are advancing somehow cheated their way there. That belief is perhaps the most expensive thing a person can carry because it removes you as an agent in your own story. It hands your future to forces you've decided you cannot influence. The tongue has always been a financial instrument. What flows out of your mouth consistently and out of the mouths of those you choose to sit with is quietly shaping what flows into your life. There is a particular kind of excitement that moves through certain social circles like a current. Someone heard about something, a deal, a scheme, an investment, a shortcut that a friend of a friend already tried and made serious money from. The energy in the room shifts. Everyone leans in. And for a moment, the idea of slow, unglamorous, daily effort feels almost embarrassing compared to the possibility of everything changing at once. That excitement is one of the most financially destructive forces a person can be regularly exposed to. Not because opportunity isn't real, but because the appetite for sudden wealth, when it becomes the culture of your environment, makes the only path that actually works feel too slow to bother with. And a path that feels too slow to bother with is a path you will never stay on long enough to see it pay off. The builders, the people who end up with something real after a decade of work, are rarely the loudest ones in those conversations. They are usually quieter, less impressed by shortcuts, almost boring in their consistency. They save a portion before they spend. They reinvest before they reward themselves. They show up to the same unglamorous work on Tuesday afternoon with the same energy they brought on Monday morning. Nothing about their process makes for an exciting story, but their results, compounded over years, are the ones that last. Proverbs 20:21 says that an inheritance gained hastily in the beginning will not be blessed in the end. And Proverbs 12:11 says that whoever works their land will have abundant food. The agricultural language is intentional. A farmer does not plant on Monday and harvest on Wednesday. There is plowing, seeding, watering, waiting, protecting, a long sequence of faithful actions, most of which happen when nobody is watching and nothing visible is changing. The harvest is real, but it is the last thing that happens, not the first. The environments built around get-rich thinking do the opposite of what they promise. They don't accelerate your path to wealth. They destroy your tolerance for the process that wealth actually requires. Every story about someone who made it overnight recalibrates your expectations downward for your own discipline. Why save consistently when someone else flipped something in a month? Why build slowly when the shortcut exists? That recalibration is the damage. It happens quietly, inside conversations that feel like inspiration, but function like erosion. God's economy has always operated on the principle of seed time and harvest. There is no version of that principle where the harvest comes before the seed. There is no version where faithfulness in small things is optional before stewardship of larger things is granted. The timeline is not a punishment. It is the architecture of how lasting things are built. Consistency in the right direction, sustained long enough, does not just produce results. It produces a kind of character that can hold the results once they arrive. And that is something no shortcut has ever been able to manufacture. I am not going to leave you with guilt. Guilt looks backward, and everything that matters from this point forward is ahead of you. What I want to leave you with is something you can actually do today, not next week, not when the circumstances are better, not when you feel more ready. Today. For the next 7 days, I want you to observe. Not judge, not act, not make any dramatic decisions. Just observe. Sit in your usual conversations and notice where they go. Notice what gets celebrated in your circle and what gets dismissed. Notice whether the people closest to you talk more about building or more about blaming. Notice whether time is treated as something sacred or something to be killed. Notice whether ambition in your environment is encouraged or quietly made to feel like arrogance. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to confront anyone. Just watch with honest eyes for 7 days, and let what you see tell you the truth that you may have been too comfortable to look at before. Because awareness is always the beginning. You cannot change what you have not named. And naming it does not require you to burn anything down. It simply requires you to stop pretending you haven't noticed. After those 7 days, I want you to do one more thing. Before you sleep, pray the prayer that changed the trajectory of a king. Solomon stood before God with everything he could have asked for within reach: wealth, power, long life, victory over his enemies. And he asked for none of it. He asked for wisdom, the ability to discern, to see clearly, to know the difference between what looks good and what actually is good. And Scripture says that because he asked for that, everything else followed. James 1:5 holds one of the most generous promises in the entire Bible. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. No conditions beyond the asking, no long qualification process. Generously and without reproach, meaning God will not make you feel small for needing it. Ask for the wisdom to see your environment clearly. Ask for the discernment to know who sharpens you and who dulls you. Ask for the courage to make quiet, faithful changes that your future self will not have to apologize for. That prayer costs nothing, and it may be worth everything.